What happens aback a prince who spent his activity abstention altercation, sits bottomward on appearance area altercation, is the abode specialty. Tonight, we bear how a affable account with Graham Norton affronted into an absolute televised adversity as Prince Harry's backbone burst beneath the flat lights. Stick about because this showdown alone gets hotter. It started as a absorbing babble and concluded in chaos. Before you judge, apprehend every absinthian chat that pushed Prince Harry over the edge. This is an aloof edition, aristocratic interview. It's a aristocratic reckoning. The flat was active with action that night. The acclaimed red daybed glowed beneath the lights. The admirers murmured in anticipation. And Graham Norton was in his element, sipping water, blockages cards, that brand archbeam bashed above his face. Aggregate was set for addition absorbing evening. Aback Prince Harry absolved assimilate the set. The acclaim were deafening. Dressed in a altogether tailored fleet suit, brittle white shirt, and no tie-tie, his accepted alloy of accidental and regal. Harry smiled and waved, giving that accustomed adolescent beam that had charmed the apple for years. He befuddled dizzily with Graham, a fresh slid into his bench at the far end of the sofa. "Your aristocratic highness," Graham said warmly, adjusting his cards as the acclaim faded. "It's not generally we get absolute ability on this sofa. How are you, Jay? How's activity alleviative you these days?" Harry chuckled politely. "I'm good, Graham, thank you. Busy, you know, and lots of assignment with brainy health. Veterans, and aggravating to aloof I'm alive a little added abreast these days." The admirers clapped again. Graham nodded thoughtfully, his eyes glinting. "Ah, yes, privacy," he mused. "We'll get to that afterwards because I brainstorm aloofness is adamantine. Aback the accomplished apple knows your name. But for now, let's allocution about your latest projects. There's a documentary advancing out soon, isn't there?" Harry smiled heartily and nodded. Acknowledgement, the emphasis of storytelling and giving veterans and underrepresented communities a voice. He battened eloquently, and the admirers nodded approvingly. For the aboriginal 5 minutes, aggregate was smooth. Graham threw in a few animated jokes. Harry played along. Amusement bounced about the studio. But then, Graham's question started, too angular sharper. So Graham began, his smile still friendly, but his emphasis aloof, a little added, pointed. "You and Meghan dispatch aback from the aristocratic family. Or is it dispatch abroad or sipping out? I lose track. What absolutely would you alarm it?" Harry's jaw stiffened slightly, admitting his smile remained. "We aloof capital to focus on our ancestors and our own work. That's all, no big mystery." "Of course," Graham said lightly, "but you do apprehend it. Attractive to anybody abroad like you ran away. One day a prince, the next, well, a Californian with a Netflix deal. Was that consistently the plan?" The admirers chuckled. Borderline, if they were declared to. Harry's announcement tightened. "It's not active abroad, if your abrogation article baneful behind." He attempted back quickly. Graham aloft his eyebrows, but maintained his composure. "Ah, toxic," he echoed. "Borer, his cards. That chat comes up a lot, aback Bodhi's allocution about you and Meghan. Baneful press, baneful palace, baneful traditions. Is there annihilation about aristocratic activity you did like?" Harry leaned aback and above his arms, his emphasis acutely. "Colder now. That's not a fair question. I served my ancestors and my country for years. But aback it started affliction the bodies I love. It was time to go." Hurting Graham pressed, still smiling, but with a glint in his eye. "Because of the columnist or because of the ancestors itself?" Harry's articulation alone bisected an octave. "Both." The temperature and the allowance confused slightly. The admirers sensed article building. Graham, unfazed, addled to his abutting card. "Well, on that note, let's allocution about Meghan. Abounding. Bodhi's acquainted she never absolutely fit in with the aristocratic family. Some alike say she knew she wouldn't and went in with an agenda. How do you acknowledge to that?" Harry's smile was gone now. He stared beeline at Graham and said, flatly. "That's nonsense and bluntly a antic question." Graham gave a little beam and captivated up his hands. "No breach intended. I'm aloof allurement what's already out there. These are the things bodies say." Harry leaned advanced slightly. "Maybe bodies shouldn't say things they apperceive annihilation about." A ripple of anxiety confused through the audience. Graham sensed it, too. But he wasn't abatement down. Of course, he replied smoothly. "But let's be honest, you're confused center above the world. Cut ties with your family, and yet you still accumulate bustling up on annual covers and TV screens. If you capital aloofness so badly, why not aloof achromatize agilely into the background?" That was the moment Harry's calm appearance began to crack. He let out a abbreviate laugh, but it wasn't warm. "You absolutely don't get it, do you?" he said, his articulation abstemious with irritation. Graham Augie, his arch slightly. "Oh, I anticipate. I get it, but I'm analytical to apprehend you explain it." Harry's eyes flashed. It's not about disappearing. It's about authoritative the narrative. Cogent, our adventure of four bodies like you askance into article ugly. Graham sat back, fingers steepled. Ah, so we're the problem. Harry didn't answer. The restriction was apparent now. The admirers still. The cameras rolling. Every brace of eyes bound on the two men as the temperature in the Saudi seemed to acceleration amount by degree. And this was alone the beginning. The admirers didn't cartel breathe. Alike the flat lights seemed hotter now. Harry sat adamant on the acclaimed red sofa, his jaw tense, his Duke white on the armrest. Graham, by contrast, sat with the airy breeding of a man who'd apparent 1,000 close interviews before, but he could faculty the crumb keg he was sitting. Abutting to him, assimilate, and he was arresting matches anyway. Well, Graham said afterwards a beat, his smile about apologetic, but his eyes bright with challenge. You've fabricated it, actual bright, you capital to ascendancy, your own story. Harry. But absolutely you can see how it looks a little contradictory. You asked for aloofness, and yet actuality. You're on my appearance in advance of millions of bodies announcement, your book, your documentary, your podcasts. It's all rather public, isn't it? Harry's lip coiled any time so slightly. There's a big aberration amid cogent your own adventure. And absolution tabloids lie about it. Ah, Graham mused, aptitude advanced slightly. But doesn't cogent your adventure allure scrutiny? The added you reveal, the added bodies will analyze. You can't absolutely apprehend the apple to artlessly acquire your adaptation afterwards question. Can you? Harry's eyes narrowed. You beggarly, your version. Graham chuckled softly. I don't accept a version, your highness. I aloof accept questions. There it was, a beam of red in Harry's cheeks. And those questions are the aforementioned ones bodies like you accept been allurement for years. You don't, affliction about answers. You aloof appetite a headline. The admirers murmured. Graham smiled tightly, steepling his fingers. All right then, he said, let me try article different. You've said about that you acquainted bottomless by the aristocratic ancestors during Meghan's time in the UK. Can you acquaint us accurately what abutment you expected, what advice you asked for that was denied? Harry exhaled acutely through his nose. I accepted them to assure her the way they adequate others, to amusement her like family, and they didn't. They didn't, Harry snapped, a budding question. Graham aloft an eyebrow, but continued, flipping to the abutting card. Actual, well, you've additionally said that racism played an ample role in your accommodation to leave the UK, but abounding in the accessible field that criticism of Meghan was added about her behavior than her background. Do you anticipate your actuality? Absolutely. Fair aback you acrylic it all with the besom of racism. Harry's arch jerked aback as admitting he'd been slapped. Excuse me, he said, his articulation icy. It's aloof, a question, Graham said, his emphasis even. Some feel you've acclimated accusations of racism to black out accepted criticism. Do you see how that ability appear across? Harry leaned advanced now, his articulation rising. No, Graham, what I see is addition aggravating to absolve bigotry, because it's dressed up as opinion. The admirers gasped at the accurateness of his tone. Graham didn't flinch. Of course, he said calmly, but isn't it additionally alarming to accept that every abrogating animadversion is abiding in racism? Sometimes bodies artlessly don't like you or your choices. That's not necessarily prejudice, is it? Harry was audacious now. You're walking, accomplished line. Graham, actual accomplished line. Graham's smile anchored into article colder. I'm walking the aforementioned band I airing with every guest. Harry, I ask questions the accessible wants answered. If those questions agitated, you, conceivably, that says added about the answers than about me. The air amid them was electric now. The added guests on the daybed had diminished into the shadows, visibly uncomfortable. Alike the audience, so loud and active at the beginning, was hushed now, blind on every syllable. All right, Graham connected afterwards, a connected pause. Let's move on. You've declared the aristocratic ancestors as an institution. Some would say that sounds rather abstract for your own beef and blood. Do you feel there's still adulation there, or is it aloof assignment and obligation at this point? Harry's adenoids flared, his fingers dug into the daybed cushion. I adulation my family, he said slowly, his articulation low and tense. But adulation isn't abundant. A back adherence alone goes one way. Interesting, Graham murmured. Do you anticipate they feel the aforementioned about you, that you've been alienated to them? Harry affronted acutely adjoined him. You don't apperceive them. You don't apperceive me, so don't pretend you understand. Graham's emphasis backward, bland as silk. I'm alone allurement what millions of admirers are already thinking. Harry befuddled his head, a absenthian beam artifice his lips. You're not asking, you're accusing. That's what you do, isn't it? Dress up apology and acumen as entertainment. Graham's smile flickered. Ball and journalism aren't mutually exclusive, he replied softly. Harry's articulation rose a notch. His accord alpha to crack. You anticipate this is journalism. You anticipate boring bodies, assimilate your daybed, and acrimonious them afar like they're animals in a zoo, is journalism. Harry, Graham began, but Harry cut him off. His articulation aciculate now, slicing through the flat silence. No, don't me. You sit there with your cards and your smirk, and you anticipate you can aloof toy with people. You anticipate because you accomplish bodies laugh. You're not affliction, anyone, but you are. You're aloof, too complacent to see it. The words afraid in the air, are the blackout, deafening. For the aboriginal time all night, Graham's announcement hardened. He leaned advanced slightly, his eyes locking assimilate Harry's. And you, he said evenly, his articulation quiet, but belted with steel. Think, because you've suffered, you're above reproach. But you're not. You came actuality, alive the questions that would come. And now, y'all, you're proving absolutely why bodies anticipate you can't handle them. Harry froze, his eyes blazing, his animation advancing faster. The admirers sat in abashed silence, the astriction blubbery, abundant to cut with the apathetic knife. Harry's Isley trembled hardily in his lap, and for an abrupt moment it looked like he ability airing off appropriate then. But instead, he backward. For now, for a few seconds, the absolute flat was frozen. The admirers sat wide-eyed and silent, the air blubbery with unease. The cameras kept rolling, capturing everything. The binding in Harry's jaw, the aside blink of claiming in Graham's eyes, and the awkward, abashed expressions of the added guests on the sofa, who looked like they capital to cook into the cushions. Harry's animation was oral now, shallow, but quick. His aspect was rigid, his Isley clenched, so deeply his duke were white. Graham, in abrupt contrast, leaned back in his armchair, with calm precision, his fingers steepled in advance of him. The blackout was burst aback. Graham, Acclaim said, you assume upset. The words were soft, but sharp, like a surgeon's scalpel. Harry's arch airtight, adjoined him, his eyes blazing. Upset. You anticipate this is upset. You sit here, Graham, authoritative Barry jabs at me, at my wife, at my family, and you anticipate I don't notice. You anticipate I don't apperceive, absolutely. What you're doing, Graham's announcement didn't change. And what absolutely am I doing? You're axis me into a spectacle, Harry hissed. That's what you do. That's what this appearance does. You accompany bodies here, accomplish them, feel welcome. A fresh cut them bottomward for sport, all while assuming it's aloof, a bit of controllable fun. Graham Agee, his arch slightly, his articulation still measured. And you came anyway, alive. All that while the catechism seemed to bang Harry like a concrete blow. He blinked adamantine, as admitting aggravating to compose himself, but the acrimony didn't fade. I came because I anticipation, maybe you'd be different. He spat. Maybe you amusement me like an animal being, not aloof, addition, headline. Graham's smile hardened, admitting it never accomplished his eyes. I've advised you absolutely like every added bedfellow who sat here. Annihilation more, annihilation less. You're the one who seems to anticipate the aphorism shouldn't administer to you. Harry's anchor clenched on his knees. Oh, don't accord me that bigoted nonsense, he snapped. You anticipate you're bigger than the tabloids aloof because you say it with a laugh, but you're not, you're worse. At Atomic, they're honest about what they are. The admirers let out an aggregate babble at that, some asthmatic softly. Graham's countenance furrowed, his emphasis cutting any time so slightly. Worse, you're accusing me of actuality worse than the affidavit that hounded your mother to her death. Is that what you're saying? Harry attempted to his feet, his face ablaze with rage. Don't you cartel accompany my mother into this, he shouted, his articulation alveolate above the studio. Don't you dare. Alike Graham leaned back heartily at the abrupt eruption. The added guests froze, their eyes darting amid the two men. Harry, Graham said afterwards a moment, his articulation alike, but with an apparent edge. You've spent years invoking her name, Abacket, apparel your narrative, but a back edition abroad does it. Abacket's off limits. That's a bifold standard, isn't it? Harry's chest heaved as he glared bottomward at Graham. You don't apperceive what you're talking about, he said, through gritted teeth. Then explain it to me. Graham pressed, still seated, still calm. Help me understand. Advice the admirers understand. You accumulate adage, you appetite, your accuracy, to be heard, so acquainted. But don't angle there and cartel and allege anybody of bad acceptance aloof because the questions are hard. Harry laughed bitterly, afraid his head. You anticipate this is about adamantine questions. You anticipate this is journalism. This is aloof edition circus. You don't affliction about answers. You don't affliction about truth. You aloof affliction about how abounding bodies tune in to watch me squirm. Graham's aperture apprenticed into a attenuate line, but he didn't, attending away. That's an absorbing theory, he said quietly, but the alone one authoritative, you agonize, is you, that was it. Harry's accord assuredly broke. His articulation rose to a abreast shout, his emphasis bluffed than ever. You anticipate this is a show, don't you? You anticipate this is all aloof, acceptable fun. You anticipate people's lives. My life is a loof ball for you to blow at and beam about. Well, congratulations, Graham, you've gotten what you wanted. He took a footfall afterpiece to the host desk, his face askance with fury. But let me acquaint you something. This isn't aloof, some joke. This isn't some game. Your arena with people's leaves, and you don't alike care. You alarm yourself, a host, a journalist, whatever, but you're aloof edition annoyer with a microphone and an audience. The admirers was asleep bashful now. Not alike a cough, not alike a whisper, aloof the aside hum of the flat lights and the complete of Harry's ragged breathing. Graham's eyes narrowed, and for the aboriginal time all night, his articulation agitated a Arctic that cut through the air. If that's how you feel, Harry, afresh conceivably, you shouldn't accept a peer because Cypher affected you into that chair. You chose to sit there. You chose to speak. And now that the questions don't clothe in you, you are calling me a bully. Harry leaned above the desk, his articulation bottomward to an antagonistic whisper, admitting the microphone still bested. Up clearly, you don't deserve to sit there. You don't deserve to allocution about bodies like me. You're a parasite. You allure bodies, actuality, aloof to abase them, to accomplish them attending baby so you can feel big. The words afraid in the air, abundant and bitter. Graham didn't flinch, admitting his jaw tightened. He stood slowly, analogous Harry's height, and the two of them bound eyes, neither accommodating to break. Maybe, Graham said finally, his articulation low but firm. You should ask yourself why you feel so baby in the aboriginal place. That was the final spark. Harry airtight, his microphone bottomward, assimilate the board so adamantine, the admirers jumped. His articulation boomed raw and abounding of fury. That's it, I'm done. You anticipate you can annoyance me and my ancestors through the mud, and alarm at entertainment, you anticipate you're clever. You anticipate you're bigger than anybody you abase up here. Well, you're not, you're pathetic. This accomplished appearance is pathetic. He affronted to the admirers now, gesturing broadly with one arm. And you lot, you sit actuality bedlam forth while he tears bodies to shreds. Do you feel acceptable about yourselves, do you? Cypher answered. Harry affronted aback to Graham, his articulation afraid with rage, but loud abundant to ample the room. You are aggregate that's amiss with this country, with this world. You dress up cruelty, his wit, and alarm at a job. Well, you can accumulate it, Graham, because I won't comedy your game. And with that, he affronted, acutely and stormed adjoin the exit. The cameras followed him as his footsteps echoed adjoin the flat floor, his back straight, his fists still clenched. Graham remained continuing abaft his desk, his announcement unreadable, his agilely on the bend of the table, the aperture bankrupt abaft Harry with a whirl thud. The admirers sat frozen, and Graham, afterwards, a long, abundant pause, assuredly exhaled and said softly, about to himself, well, that escalated quickly. The camera zoomed in on his face as he straightened his jacket, his eyes still anchored on the aperture area. Harry had disappeared. The aperture, airtight shut, abaft Harry with an answer that seemed to echo through every bend of the studio. For several long asthmatic seconds, the admirers artlessly sat there, stunned. No one clapped, no one spoke. The complete of Harry's, affronted footsteps, achromatic bottomward, the aisle above the set, and a fresh annihilation but silence. The added guests on the daybed exchanged afraid glances, acutely borderline whether they should break, put, or agilely blooper away. The camera backward bound on Graham, who stood abaft his desk, easily comatose on the wood, staring at the aperture through which Harry had exited. Afresh finally, Graham straightened his jacket, let out a apathetic breath, and affronted aback. To face the audience, his signature smile returning, admitting this time, Edgewood with steel. Well, he said dryly, that was festive. A ripple of afraid amusement swept through the audience, breaking the spell. Some clapped politely. Graham, captivated up at Duke, to quiet them, his emphasis aback serious. Look, he began, I appetite to say article actuality, because acutely tonight when an administration none of us expected, atomic of all, me. But here's the thing, he paused, scanning the admirers and a fresh casual beeline into the camera. I've been accomplishing this job a actual connected time, he said, his articulation alike but deliberate. And in that time, I've had anybody on this sofa, bedrock stars, presidents, prime ministers, actors, authors, saints, and sinners. Some of them charming, some of them difficult, all of them human. He bankrupted the board lightly. And what we do, actuality on this date, is ask questions. Sometimes they're accessible questions. Sometimes they're hard, but they're questions bodies deserve to apprehend answered. That's not bullying. That's not cruelty. That's conversation. And if a bedfellow can't handle that, conceivably, they shouldn't exceed to sit in this chair. The admirers bankrupt into broadcast applause, admitting Graham coiled it bottomward with a side smile. I accept annihilation, but accord for Harry's struggles, he continued, his articulation abatement aloof slightly. For what he went through as a boy, and what he continues to endure. But sympathy, he added, his emphasis cutting again, doesn't absolve anyone from scrutiny. Abnormally aback, they voluntarily put themselves in the spotlight. He leaned advanced now, his eyes glittering. Because accomplish no mistake, he said. That wasn't me advancing him. That was him advancing himself. What you aloof saw wasn't animality from me. It was a man so bent to ascendancy the anecdotal, that he couldn't angle actuality, ask the simplest questions about it, and that says added about him than it does about me. The admirers murmured in agreement, some alike acclamation again, louder this time. Graham's boring drifted to the attic for a moment, afresh aback to the camera. And to Harry, if you're watching this later, I am wishing you and your ancestors annihilation, but peace. But if you appear actuality to acquaint your story, don't apprehend me or anyone abroad to aloof nod forth and smile, because that's not honesty. That's theater. And this appearance is not theater. This is a conversation. He gave a side shrug, afresh sat aback bottomward in his chair. Acrimonious, up a cue card. Well, he said, his signature wit re-emerging to lighten the mood. That was Prince Harry. Everyone, for about 15 minutes. Anyway, the admirers laughed, this time added freely, the restriction assuredly breaking. Advancing up next, Graham said, casual at the added guests, still built in on the sofa, who were now visibly relieved. Will be abutting, by addition. Who doesn't apperception answering questions, or at atomic hasn't stormed off yet. The camera pulled aback hardly as Graham chuckled cautiously to himself. Ambiguity his cards, as if annihilation had happened, admitting the slight beam on his face said otherwise. But afresh he looked beeline into the lens one aftermost time, his eyes absorption playfully, and for anyone at home who's agitated by what you've aloof seen, don't be, he said, because the accuracy has a way of advancing out, whether you like it or not, and tonight you all saw it for yourselves. He leaned back, advanced his accoutrements casually, and let the flat lights flash bottomward on him as the acclaim swelled about him already, more, and there, you accept it. The acclaimed knight Prince Harry stormed off the Graham Norton show. Abrogation a abashed admirers and a host who band to a back down. If you enjoyed this behind-the-scenes breakdown of one of the best acute appearance moments ever, don't balloon to hit that like button. Leave a mod version below. Do you anticipate Graham went too far, or was Harry out of line? And of course, accomplish abiding, to subscribe so you don't absence added absurd belief. Like this one. Thanks for watching, and remember, the accuracy may be uncomfortable, but it's consistently account hearing.